Hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar hosted by Pacific Environment. We are very pleased that you could join us today. My name is Katsunori Hirano. I'm the Japan climate specialist at Pacific Environment. Pacific Environment is a non-governmental organization based in San Francisco, California, with consultative status at the International Maritime Organization. We advocate for zero-emission solutions in the shipping and port sectors. Today's webinar's title is Advancing Port Decarbonization, a new analysis of Japan's carbon neutral port initiatives. This webinar includes live interpretation. If you prefer the Japanese language, please look for the globe icon called Interpretation at the bottom of your Zoom window. After locating the globe icon, please click the language you want to hear. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and later made available on Pacific Environment's YouTube channel in both English and Japanese. Today, we are joined by 5 outstanding guest speakers from California and Japan. Mr. David Wooley, lecturer, director of the Environment Center, Goldman School of Public Policy of the University of California, Berkeley. David is the author of the recent study of an analysis of Japan's carbon neutral port initiative and Yokohama Port and Harbor Bureau Harbor Decarbonization Plan. Mr. Sadaharu Hori from the Government of Japan. Mr. Hori is currently Director of CNP Promotion Office at the Industrial Port Policy Division, Ports and Harbors Bureau of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. Mr. Hitoshi Nakamura from the City of Yokohama, Japan. Mr. Nakamura has been Director for Carbon Neutral Port Promotion at the Policy Coordination Division of the City of Yokohama Port and Harbor Bureau since April 2021. Ms. Colleen Liang from the Port of Oakland. Ms. Liang is Director of Environmental Programs and Planning of the Port of Oakland. She has been with the Port of Oakland for 26 years and manages environmental compliance, planning, and permitting port-wide. Mr. Oliver Yasuhito Imaizumi is an executive researcher at the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. Mr. Imaizumi has over 20 years of experience in the maritime fuel industry. And last but not least, please let me introduce our Teresa Bui from Pacific Environment. Teresa is Senior Director of Climate Campaign. She will moderate a panel discussion with all 5 guest speakers later today. With that, please welcome Teresa Bui. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Teresa Bui, and I have the pleasure of leading Pacific Environment's maritime decarbonization shipping work. We work globally, which includes the US and Asia. Pacific Environment is a global nonprofit organization working across climate, marine conservation, biodiversity protection, and plastic pollution reduction. We work to advance practical solutions with our shipping and ports, offshore wind, clean energy campaigns that are rooted in community voices. Ports sit at the center of global trade and are economic engines. However, this also tends to be a major source for pollution source for communities. Ports are also increasingly at the center of climate action. As governments and industry seeks to practical pathways to reduce emissions, port decarbonization represents one of the most immediate and high-impact opportunities available today. This is why the Japan Carbon Neutral Port Initiative is so important. The CNP framework offers one of the world's most structured approaches to translating climate ambition into concrete policies, infrastructure planning, and implementation. Among these efforts, Yokohama stands out as a leading example of how ports can begin with turning long-term decarbonization goals into reality. Thank you so much for their leadership. We're also honored to be joined by Director Wooley, who's worked together with the UC Berkeley study, provides valuable insights into Japan's CNP framework and its broader implications for port decarbonization. At the same time, California continues to demonstrate global leadership in this space. The Port of Oakland provides a powerful real-world example of how ports can advance electrification, clean energy deployment, and community-centered decarbonization strategies. Today's discussion brings together lessons from two global leaders, Japan and California. More importantly, it provides an opportunity to exchange perspectives across countries, sectors, and institutions, and to explore how these experiences can inform broader efforts around the world. Our shared challenge is no longer defining ambition, it is delivering implementation. And that's why today's conversation matters. Thank you. And with that, I turn it back to Katsunori.
Thank you, Teresa, for sharing those remarks with us. Now it's my pleasure to hand the floor over to today's featured guest speaker, Director David Wooley, who will deliver our keynote remarks. Welcome, David. It's over to you.
Hello, everyone, and I'd like to welcome the audience to this webinar. It was really a great pleasure and opportunity for me to work on this report. It involved extensive research in national and city level policies in Japan, as well as bringing to bear experience that we've had in California on port and vessel decarbonization. Both Japan and California are in the midst of a rapidly evolving technology, best practices, and economics of port and vessel operations. One of those recently in California is the rapid transformation of heavy-duty drayage truck market, with recent changes affecting availability of zero-emission battery electric heavy-duty trucks, signaled by the mass production of Tesla's 800-kilometer range electric semi. And this is just one example of how quickly the technology of port operations and vessels are changing. One conclusion I have from my research is that both Japan and California are among world leaders on emission controls from ports, terminals, and vessels. At the same time, this sector, both in California and in Japan, are still in early stages. We both are learning how to implement port and vessel decarbonization within complex greenhouse gas control policies. In California, it's the California Cap and Invest legislation. And in Japan, the emission trading system, the GX ETS. All of this occurs within the enhanced context of rising fossil fuel prices, supply disruptions, conflict over fossil fuel availability, rising awareness of climate impacts, and national security implications of both climate change and fossil fuel dependence. Our research led to several recommendations that I'll describe later in the seminar. I want to say that it was a great pleasure to meet Mr. Hori, Mr. Nakamura, and their very accomplished staff when I was in Yokohama and Tokyo in March. And I look forward to their presentations, as well as the presentation of my colleague, Colleen Liang, I've had the pleasure to work with for some time in Oakland, California. Katsunori, I'll turn it back to you and Teresa.
Thank you, David, for those insightful remarks. Let me briefly outline how today's session will proceed.
Katsunori, would you like me to step in?
Yes, please. Could you
Okay,
please open up the
sure. Yes.
agenda slide? Thank you.
Yes, we will have 4 presentations of 10 minutes each provided, first provided by Mr. Hori from the government of Japan, followed by Mr. Nakamura from the city of Yokohama, then Mrs. Liang from the Port of Oakland, and finally delivered by Director Wooley. All presenters will then join us for the panel discussion together with Oliver Imazumi from the Institute of Energy Economics Japan, and I will serve as the moderator. And then during the panel discussion, we will be collecting questions from the audience. So please use the Zoom Q&A box and type in your questions as they come to mind. And we'll do our best in real time to answer in real time. And so with that, let's begin the presentation session. So our first presenter is Mr. Hori, Director of CNP Promotion Office in the Industrial Port Policy Division, Ports and Harbor Bureau of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, Japan. It is my pleasure to hand it over to you, Mr. Hori, please.
こんにちは、皆さん。
Hello, everybody.
私は日本の国土交通省の
So
堀と申
yes,
します。
I am
まずは
Hori
じめに
from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure,
また
Transport, and
パシフィックエンバイロ
Tourism
メン
of
トの
Japan.
皆様へ
Thank you so very much,
日本の取り組
Director
みにです
Uli
ね、着
and
目を
Pacific
していただい
Environment to
て、
focus
ま
on our
た本
initiatives
日
in
このような
Japan
機会を
and
い
also
ただ
to
き
be
ました こ
given
とに
this
深
opportunity
く
to
感謝い
present
たしま
today.
す。
We deeply appreciate this chance.
日本の港湾では
And
約5年ほど前から
so,
脱炭素
talking
社会
about the
の
ports in
実
Japan,
実現に向け
we
て
have been
カー
working
ボン
on
ニュートラルポート
decarbonization
略して
from about
CNP
five years
と
ago,
いうことで
and we call
網羅
this
的な
initiative
取り
Carbon
組みを進
Neutral
めてきて
Port,
います。
CNP, and it's quite a
日本を代
comprehensive
表する
initiative that has
港
been
湾であ
going
る
on.
横浜港で
Now,
の取り
today
組みに
we
ついて
have the
は
initiatives from Yokohama Port.
後ほどで
Mr.
すね
Nakamura
横浜市の
from the
中村
city
課
of
長の方か
Yokohama will
ら
talk about
ご
their
紹介
initiatives
があり
on
ます
this
ので
most
私の方
iconic
からは
port
日本
in
全体の
Japan.
取り組みの概要に
And
つ
so,
いて
since he's
ご
covering
紹介をし
Yokohama,
た
I
い
would like to
というふう
talk
に思い
more
ます。
about the nationwide initiatives.
まず1ページ目、
So,
こちら
here's my
は
slide.
日本の脱炭素化に向け
On
た
page
目
one,
標について
we
説明
show
をし
our
ています。
targets in Japan for
国家目
decarbonization.
標として
It is our national
2050年の
target
カーボンニュートラル
to aim
ネッ
for
トゼロ
carbon
を掲げて
neutrality
い
in
ます。
2050, net zero.
これまでの取り組みで
Through our
2013年
initiatives
から
to
すでに
date,
約
we have
30%
already been
を
able to
削
reduce
減をしていま
approximately
すけれど、
30% since 2013,
2050年の目標
but
を
by
達成す
2050,
る
we
た
need
め
to
には
achieve carbon neutrality.
2030年までに
The steps to
46%、
achieving
ま
that
た
is
2040年には
46%
60%
reduction
削減
by
することが
2030 and
必要
60%
となってお
reduction
り、
by 2040.
各分野で
And to
継
achieve
続
this,
的な取り組み
all
が進
parties
めら
in
れてい
various
ます。
fields are working
次
aggressively.
のスライドです。こちらはカーボンニュートラル
So
ポ
on
ー
this
ト
slide,
CNP
we
の
show
取り
that there
組
are
みに
two
ついてご
pillars
紹
in
介です。
CNP.
2つの柱からなっています。
So the
左側
first
の
pillar
方が
here, you can see on the
1つ目の
left-hand
柱、
side.
水素やアンモニアのなどの代替燃料を
So this
扱
is
う
about
インフラの
maintaining
整
and
備について
developing
で
the
す。日
infrastructure
本の港湾や沿
that
岸
will
部
be
には
dealing with
低
alternative
出水
fuel like
化学
hydrogen
発
and
電などの
ammonia.
産業が集積してい
In the
ます。
ports and coastal
多く
areas
の
of Japan,
CO2 が
there
排出
are
されてい
various
ますの
industry
で、
players such as
こういったとこ
steel,
ろに対して港湾
chemicals,
におい
and
て
power
海上輸送さ
generation
れた
companies.
脱
And
炭
so
素エネルギー
there
である
are a
水素、ア
lot
ン
of
モニア、
CO2
こういったも
being
のを受け入れて
emitted
産
here.
業に供
And
給
so
す
in the
るという
ports,
ものです。
we need to make sure that
右
we
側の
accept
方が
hydrogen
2つ
and
目の柱です。
ammonia to help
港湾にお
with the
けるコーポレーションの
decarbonization
脱炭素化、
so
貨
that
物
we
の
can
積み下ろ
provide this
し、
to the industry.
船
The
舶への
second
サービス
pillar
な
is
ど
on
に
the
つい
right-hand
て、
side, and this is
サ
really
プラ
about
イ
the
チェーンの脱炭素
decarbonization
化
of
を
the
促
port
進める荷物
operations,
や船会社の負担に
about
応え、
unloading
対
on
応
the
を図って
ports and
港湾の
providing
競争
services to
力
the
向上にも
vessels,
つなげていこうというも
and
の
make
です。
sure that we take
次の
countermeasures
スラ
that
イドをお願い
meet
します。
the expectations of
こちら
shippers
の
and
方
shipping
がカー
companies
ボンニュートラル
in
ポート
supply
につ
chain.
いてです。
This slide is about the
実現するための仕組みになります。
CNP and the system
講和に
in
位
which
置
we
し
would
て
like
多
to
様な関
achieve
係者が目標
the
を共有して
decarbonization. We have
取り
various
組む理
parties
念を
sharing
具
the
体化
goals
して協力
and
していく
working
必要がありま
on
す。
specifying the items
ま
that we
た、
need
日
to
本の港
take
湾行
actions
政
in
は
and
国が
cooperate with
主
each
体
other.
方針ですとか大
Now,
規模な
the
インフラ整
administration
備、
regarding
こういったもの
Japanese
になりまし
ports
て、
is
地方自
based
治体が
on
各
the
港湾
Ports
を
and
管理する
Harbors
仕組みとなってい
Act.
ます。
And so
そ
the
のため、
national government is in charge of the basic
2022
policies
年に
and the
港湾
large-scale
法を
infrastructure
改正しま
development,
して、
and the local governments
港
are
湾を
in
管理
charge
する
of the
自治体、
management
港
of
湾
each
管理者
ports.
が
So that's why
関係者から
we have
構成される
amended
協議
the
会を
Ports
設
and
置を
Harbors
し
Act
て、
in
CNP の
2022
形成に向け
to
た
make sure we
計
can,
画、
and also
各単価
facilitate
推
the
進
port
計画を
management
作
bodies
成でき
together
る
in
とい
a
う規定
council
を設けました。
so that we can all work together in
日本
accordance
は
to the
南北に長い
decarbonization
島
promotion
国に
plan.
なっています。
Japan
全
is
国
a
各地に
long
大
strip
小
of
の多くの
land,
港
an
があり
island
まし
country
て、
that goes
その
all
う
the
ち
way
法律
down
の上で
south to up north,
海上
long
輸送の
coastal
拠
lines
点とされる比較的規模の大き
around
い
the
港湾、
entire
こちら
nation
の方
land.
は合
And
計
there
で
are many
125
ports,
ありま
large
す。
and small, a
こ
total
の
of
125の
125 that are
港の
relatively
中で
large,
現在までに
we have
約100の
identified
港
as
で
key
協議
maritime
会が立ち
logistics
上がってい
ports.
て、
So
その
among
中
the
の74の
125
港湾
ports,
がすでに脱炭
100
素化推
have
進計画を
already
作成していま
established
す。
their
こ
councils,
のように
and 74
CNP の
of
取り
them
組み
are
は
already
全国
working
で
on
展
their
開されています。
decarbonization promotion plans.
3
So
分
this
野目の
initiative is
脱炭素化
nationwide.
には様々な手法があります
Now,
が、
there's various ways to work
こ
on
こではコンテナター
decarbonization
ミ
of
ナ
the
ルの運輸
terminals,
主
but
体であ
we're
る
looking at the cargo handling
RTP の
equipment in the
燃
container
料にとし
terminal,
て燃料時
retired
に
gantry,
CO2
or
を排出しない
RTG fuels.
CO2 の活用の
And
取り組
this
み
is
を
a
ご紹
case where
介
we're
します。
using hydrogen
これ
that
まで
does not
に
emit
3つの港
CO2
湾
during
で
combustion.
現地の
So
現
in
地
three
実証を
ports
行
so
い、
far, we've gone through
安全
POC
性、安全性
demonstration
などに問題ないことを確
and
認しています。
have been able
現
to
在
confirm
は
that
水
there's
素の
no
普及を
problems
見据え
regarding
た
safety
基地の
and
導
the
入やガイドラ
operation
イン
or
の
the
策定を
motions of the
進めていま
equipment.
す。
So now
ま
the
た、
Ministry of
海外
Land
の脱炭素
Infrastructure,
化の取り組みに対応して
Transport and
船舶
Tourism
への
is putting
代
together a
替燃料の供
guideline
給
so
に
that
つ
we
いて
can
必要な
proliferate
環
the
境
best
整備を進めて
practices.
います。
We think that hydrogen will
国
expand
土
going
交通
forward,
省の
and
排気
so
部
we're
門が
going
中心に
to
なって
increase larger
必要
capacity
なガイドラインも整備
batteries
してい
for
ます。
hybrid
ま
types of
た、
equipments. And
LNG についてはすでに4カ所で拠点整備を支援しています。
as we work on the maritime
エタノールについて
decarbonization,
は
we're working on the
今年
bunkering
2月に
alternative fuels as
横
well.
浜港の
The
沖合
Maritime
で
Department of
バンカリング
MLIT
船か
is
らの
putting together
燃
the
料供
necessary
給を行う
guidelines
トライアルを実
and
施してい
working
ます。
on LNG in 4 locations.
次
Regarding
世代
methanol,
のエネルギ
where
ーとして
we've tried this
注
in
目されて
February
い
in
る水素ア
Yokohama
ンモニア
and
に
have
ついて
achieved
は
Japan's
日本で
first
は
ship-to-ship bunkering.
海
In
海外
terms of
から
next generation
輸入が
energy,
必要である
which
と
is
いうふうに
hydrogen
想
and
定されて
ammonia
います。
mainly, we know
その
that
場合、
in Japan we'd have to
島国
import
です
from
ので
overseas, and we're
海
an
上輸
island
送され
country,
たも
so
のを
we
港
will
湾
have
で受け
to
入れる必要があります。
receive
現
these
在、
alternative fuels
輸
in our
送、輸
ports
送に関
that
す
have
る
been
各種
carried
の技術
across
開
the
発の
ocean.
ほか、
So that's why
黎
we're
明期
working on
技術
transportation and
作りとし
storage
て
of
国
these
連の下
energies,
で
working on technology
発電所
development,
で燃
and
料利
trying to
用する
build
もの
the
の
use
社
case,
会実装
which
の
is
取
still
り組
at
みを
very
進
early
展しつつあ
stage.
ります。
The country is supporting the
続
price
いて
gap
はアン
between
モニ
fossil
アを大
fuels
量に取り扱うにあたって
and
は安全をしっかりと担保して効率
working
的
on
に供給する必
implementation
要があります。
into the society
国
so
土
that
交通
this
省では
fuel can be
港湾
used
に
in
お
the
ける
power
施設のレ
generations
イアウ
across
トなどに
Japan.
ついて整備したガ
In
イドライン
handling
を
hydrogen and
作成
ammonia,
し公表し
MLIT
てい
will
ます。
put together a guideline showing
各ターミ
some
ナルにおける
specific
脱炭素化の
layouts
努
of the
力、
facilities on the
こちらにつ
ports.
いては客観的な基
So
準
you
に基
see
づ
the
いて
efforts that
公
we've
正
made
に
so
評
far
価する
regarding
制度、
decarbonization based on
CNP 認
very
証制度について
um,
昨年の6月より
objective
運用を開始
criteria.
しています。
We we have a certification
この
system,
制度は
CNP
脱炭素化に向け
certification
た
system,
取り
which
組み
is
をル
in
ール化しま
operation
して
since June
収
last
益
year.
や背中
It
イテムを分かり
is
やすく示す
addressing the
ことも目
container
的と
terminals
して
in
います。
Japan so that
日本
the
国内
MLIT
の
will
大きな
evaluate
タ
and
ーミナルを対
certify
象にしていまして、 ターミ
the
ナルを運
applications
営す
coming
る機関
from
から
the
の申
terminal
請を受け
operating
て、
bodies,
国土
and
交通省が審査、
we will
検
be
証します。
basically evaluating 2 points:
評価の項目として
decarbonization
は、
of terminals with
低脱炭
introduction
素
of
型
low
燃料機関の導
carbonization
入など、
or
ターミナルの脱炭
decarbonization
素化に向け
of
た取り組
cargo
み、
handling
船
equipments,
舶車両の脱炭素化に資する取り組み
and
などから
2,
構成され
decarbonization
ております。
efforts in vessels and vehicles.
また、この CNP 認証制度については、
So
努力
regarding
の
the
制度について
CNP
5段階で評価認証します。
decarbonization
低脱
certification,
炭素型
we
燃
will
料機
be
体の
evaluating
導入
and
や
certifying them on a scale of
環境
5,
に配慮した
according
船
to
舶
the
優遇政策、
decarbonization of
ま
the
あ、こういったところ
terminals,
を要求事
with
項として
introduction
設
of
定しまし
decarbonization
て、
of cargo
その達成
handling
条件に応じ
equipments
て、5段階で分類をしま
and
す。
efforts in vessels and vehicles. And
さ
so
ら
if they
に、
do more,
低脱炭
we
素
will
船
add
舶
a
燃料の供
plus
給など、
as the
本
sixth
質
item
的な
if they
取り
have
組みに
leading
つきまして
initiatives
は、
going on.
えー
So
推
far,
奨
we've
項目
already
としていま
given
して、
certification
達
to
成内容
11
について
container
は、
terminals across the
項目
country,
ご
and
と
there's
に
still
プラス
many
を
applications and
つける
inquiries
仕
coming
組
in
みとな
from
ってい
various
ます。
bodies
これまでに、
across
11のターミ
Japan.
ナルを認証しまして、現在も多くのタ
And
ーミ
we
ナルが
continue to
認証を
evaluate
新しい認
these
証を
applications
希
as
望
we
している
speak.
というところとなっています。10ページ目、こちらは
And this is
日
slide
本の
10, showing
南西部
one
に
of
ある
the
博多
southwestern
港という
ports
港
in
のコンテ
Japan,
ナターミナルの事例
Hakata,
になります。
Port Hakata, and its container
この
terminal.
ターミナルでは
So in this
電
case,
動
you can
型の
see that we
RTG、
have the electric type of
LED によるヤードの
RTG
照明、
and also
効
the
率
yard
的な
illumination
ゲート
with
処理システム
LED
など
and a
の導
very
入によ
efficient
りま
gate
して、
processing system.
レベル5として
So with
認証
this,
をしていま
we've
す。
been able to give
ま
this
た、
a level
ターミナ
5.
ルの方からは、
From the terminal side,
認証を活用して、荷主や
they've
船
shown
会社
very
に対して
proactive
脱炭素化の取り
efforts
組みを価値を
working
積極
on
的に
reducing
発信していき
environmental
たいと
burden
いう声
and
をいただいていま
energy
す。
saving. But now with this
10ペ
certification,
ージ目、
they said
こ
they
ち
are
らが最
pleased
後のスライド
to
になります。
be objectively
CNP
evaluated
の取り
because
組
it
みに関
helps
する
them
国際協力について
to
のご紹
promote
介です。
their efforts even further.
日本と ASEAN
Finally,
の
this is
各
about the
国
international
では間で
cooperation
は
regarding
長
CNP
年にわた
initiatives
っ
between
て
Japan and ASEAN for a
交通
very
分
long
野で
time.
の連携の
We've
協力を
had
行ってきています。
collaboration regarding the
飽
transport
和分野
domain.
での共同研
So
究として
as a part of that,
ASEAN
we
諸
have a
国にお
joint
ける
research going on
CNP の
regarding
実現に向け
ports,
たガイ
and
ドライン
ASEAN
を作成
countries
しています。
have put together a
ま
guideline to
た
realize CNP as
国
well.
際荷役調整協会
Also, with
イチカの総会におい
ICHCA,
て
ICHCA,
CNP
or
認証
International
制度
Cargo
の
Handling
項を
Coordination
紹介すると
Association
ともに
general
現在
meeting,
当協
we've
会におい
introduced the
て
CNP
国
certification
際版
system.
のガイド
And
ラインを
currently,
作成す
the
べく
ICHCA
調整を
Association
進めています。
is trying to coordinate
今
an
後も
international
各国
version
と
of the
の知見の
guideline.
共有や
We
協
hope
力
we
を
can
通じ
continue
て
to
脱炭素
share
化に
our
貢
knowledge and
献を
expertise
していきたいと
with
いうふう
our
に思います。
fellow colleagues in each countries to contribute to
先ほど
decarbonization.
お話があったように、
Earlier,
脱炭素化社会の実
as
現に
was
あたっ
mentioned,
て、
in order to
港湾の果
realize
たすべき
a
役割というの
decarbonized
は非常に
society,
大きいも
the
のが
role
ある
of
とい
ports
うふう
is
に考えていま
significant,
す。
we believe.
我々としては社会の期待
So,
に応えられるように、
as
必要なこと
MLIT,
を着実に
we
進
would
めてい
like
き
to
たい
take action
というふう
steadily
に
so
考
that
え
we
てお
can
ります。
respond to the
ご清
requests
聴あ
from
り
the
がとうござい
society.
ました。
Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hori, for that insightful overview of Japan's CNP initiative. Our second presenter is Mr. Hitoshi Nakamura from the city of Yokohama. We are delighted to have you with us, Mr. Nakamura. I will hand it over to you.
おはようございます。
Good morning.
横浜市港湾局の中村です。
Good
よろしく
morning.
お願いいた
I'm
します。
Nakamura from the
ま
city
ず
of
初めに
Yokohama Port and
ウーリー
Harbor
先生に
Bureau.
ですね、
So, first of all, to
私た
Director
ちの計
Uli,
画を見てもらって、
I'd
そ
like
の
to
予定がこの
thank
よ
you
うな
very
形
much
に
for
なりま
taking a
して、
look
大
at
変
our
嬉しく思い
our
ます。
plan
先
and
ほど
and
よろし、
making
お願い
this
で
happen.
じゃあ始めさせていただきます。
So, without further ado, we would like to start.
最初の方のスライドは、
So these are
もう横浜港
some
の紹介
slides
です
on
の
the
で、
outline. It's just an
簡単に
introduction
進め
of
ていき
Port
たいと思い
Yokohama,
ま
so
す。
I'll go very quickly.
これはもう場所を書いてるだけですね。
Yeah,
これ
this
で
is just a
お願いし
location.
ます。
So here we are. Here's Yokohama.
横浜はですね、
And
私、英語で言うときはオールラウンドプレイヤーというよう
we
な表
call
現をして
Yokohama
います。
Port an
イ
all-round
ンダスト
player
リアルから、
because it
コンテナ、道
has
路、ガス
everything
みたいなです
from
ね、さまざまな機能が詰まった、
logistics,
と
production,
ても
and
良い、
tourism
とても良い港
tourism
になってます。
in
富
the
士山の
maritime
ようにで
industry.
ございます。
So you can see that Mount Fuji is also
これは
beautifully depicted on
今
this
の、
photo.
横浜での
It's a
船舶が
wonderful
使います水
port.
量を、
And so
リストし
this
たものです。
shows some
後ほど
stats
見られた
regarding
らと思い ます。
the vessels and the vehicles that we
で、こ
have.
のス
Please
ライド
look
がで
at
すね、
this in
ま
detail
あ、今日
later
は
on.
カリフォルニアの皆
And
様
this
との
slide,
お
since
話
we
になりま
have
すの
our
で、
colleagues from
ま
California,
あ、改め
a
て、
slide
カ
showing
リフォル
the
ニア、カリフォ
routes
ルニアと
between the
横
Port
浜
of
の関係でいう
Yokohama
と、
and
まあ、
California.
太平洋
Looking
な
at
んで
this
すね、トランスパ
relationship,
パシフィ
you
ッ
can
ク、
see
隣
we
の
have a
私たちのようにお
trans-Pacific
隣の港があるというふうに
transportation
言われ
going
ております
on.
ので、
You are the
まあ、
port,
カリフォル
the
ニア、カリ
neighborhood
フォルニア
port in
の
that
の
sense,
関係はとても大事だ
right
と思っていま
nearby,
す。
and we have a
で、
very
これはコ
good
ンテナルー
and
トで、
meaningful relationship. So
次
this
に
is
こ
the
ちらローロー
container
のルートです
route,
ね。
and this is the Ro-Ro route
いろんな港と関係があって、
connected
これ
with
からも、
various
いい関係でいき
ports
たいという
in
ふうに思って
California, and we
おり
hope
ま
we
す。
can maintain a good
は
relationship
い。
in the future
で、
as well.
ここから少し、
So
丁
from
寧に
here
説明したいと
on,
思い
I'd
ます。
like to
ま
go
ず、今
into
見ていただいている
details.
のは、
So
左
what
側
you
の、
are looking
円
at
グラフ、
right
パイチャー
now,
トはですね、
the pie chart on the left-hand side,
円の外側が、
you can
横
see
浜
that
市
on
全
the
体の
outside,
CO2 排出量。
this is the CO2
内側
emission for
の
the
色が
Yokohama
ついたとこ
city
ろが、
and total,
ウォ
and
ータ
the
ーフロントエ
inside,
リア
the
の排出
colored
量を示
part
しており
is the
ます。
waterfront
横
emission
浜
in
市全
Yokohama
体からすれ
port.
ば、臨海部
So
は
you
面
can
積は少
see
ないですけども、
that the
約
coastal part
40% の
area is
CO2 が排
not
出されております。
large, but
と
it
ても
does
臨海部の
account
脱
for
炭素は
40% of the total emissions from the
推
entire
進ではとて
Yokohama
も大事
city.
というよう
So
な
you can
説明
see
になり
how
ます。
significant it
で、
is
まあ、
to
この
work
よう
on
にですね、
decarbonization in
CO2 を
this
セ
port.
クター別に
So when you
分類し
break this
て、き
down
ちんと把
by
握しているのが、
sector,
実は日本では横浜港だけ
and
ですの
actually,
で、
it is only Yokohama port that
環
has
境
a
のこと
good
を考える
grasp
意
of
味
the
では、
statistics like
CO2 のセ
this
クター別ってす
per
ごく大事なの
sector.
で、
And I'd
こういう
like
取り組
to
みが
share with
広まっていけ
everybody
れ
that
ばいい
it's
なと
really
いうふうに思っ
important
ておりま
to
す。
break this down by sector because each sector needs to work on their part to
で、
make this
こ
happen.
のイラストがですね、このイ
And
メー
this
ジ図が、
illustration here,
私たち
this
の
is the image
横浜港
of
脱炭素化
our
推進計画、
port
ポートハーバーディカーボナイゼ
and
ーションプランの
the port
イ
and
メージ
harbor
図でございます。
decarbonization port
今
plan
取り組んで
that
いる
we're
ものから
promoting as we
将来
speak.
取り組むもの
There's
ま
some
で
that we're
様々
working
な
on
もの
now.
を
There's some
イラ
that
ス
we
ト
need
で
to work on in the
書い
future.
てお
So
り
a
ま
lot
す。
of them mixed together
で、
on
大ま
this
かに言うと、
illustration. All these
こ
things
の
that
イ
we're
ラストの
working
上の
on.
方がですね、
On the very
エネ
upper
ルギー
part of
転
this
換とか、
illustration, you can
エネ
see
ルギ
this is
ーを
where
中心
we
と
do
した
the energy
取り
conversion,
組みになり、
basically
イラストの下の
done
方
by
は、
the energy
コンテナ
companies. And
関
in
連
the bottom part
や
of this
漁業
photo, you
関連
see
で
the
すね、
container
主な
terminals and the
港の
Ro-Ro
関連の中
terminals
の出来
here,
事を書いたような取り
and a
組
lot
み
of
と、
things happening here as
書いたよう
well.
なイラストとしております。でですね、まあ、当たり
And
前の、まあ、よくある、こう
this
いうことやって
is,
ますって説明しても、あまり意
you
味がない
know,
ので、
an illustration
まあ、
that I
私も
created
着任し
because
て、
I
まあ、
thought just
6年、2
explaining
年にな
what
り
we
ます
do
が、
is very
この間ですね、ちょっと何を、
ordinary, and I
私
thought
たち
that
は
would
頭の
not
中で
be
考
so
えながら、
meaningful.
この
So
カー
I
ボンニュ
thought
ートラ
I'd
ル、
show
同じ
you
このカ
my
ーボンニュー
thought
トラルに取り
process
組ん
as
で
to
きた
how
方
we were working
という
on
ものを実
carbon
施したのが、こ
neutral
ち
in
ら
our
の絵になっ
port.
てます。
So the illustration of our
まず、
thought process
2020年に、当
shows
時の、
that
日本の総理大臣
first,
が、
in
カーボンニュート
2020,
ラル
the
宣
Prime
言
Minister of
というものを行
Japan
いまし
declared
た。
Japan's 2050
で、
carbon
それからです
neutrality,
ね、それから2、
and
3年間ぐら
then
い、
for
2021
about
年から
2 to
2023
3
年ぐらいは、
years, from
日
2021
本
to
のエネルギー企業や、
2023,
ローカル
many
ガバメント
Japanese
含
energy
めてです
companies
ね、
and local
何に
governments
挑戦し
set
てい
up
たかと
two
言います
goals.
と、
What they were working
日
on
本語
are
で言う
these
と、
points.
水素やアンモニアの価格差支
So,
援の取
first
り
of
組み、
all, they were trying to support the
プラスディ
price
ファレンスですね。
differential
もう
for
一
low
つは、
carbon
水素やアンモニアの
fuels.
大規模な拠点を目指し
And
ま
the
しょう
other
と
one
いう
was
ような
to
話があり
create
ました。
a
で、これ
large-scale
は、
hydrogen
日本
and
で言うと、
ammonia hub.
経済産業省ですね、農
So
水
this
の
was
方
led
が中心
by
になって取り組み
Ministry
でした
of
けれども、
Economy, Trade and
まずはここ
Industry,
をすご
METI.
く、
But yes,
もう
this
多くの関係
was
者集まっ
what
てですね、
many players
や
got
っていた
together
時期があり
really
ましたが、
to work on this at one
2023
point.
年ぐらいに
But
なっ
in
てくると、ちょっと
2023, around
ハ
that
イドロジェンの取り組
point,
みが
our
少し
initiatives
思った
regarding
より規模よりも
hydrogen
難しくなってきたかなと
became
いうタイミング
difficult, especially in large-scale
出ま
companies.
した。で、同じ時期に
And
私たちは
it coincided with the
ジャパ
timing
ンの
that
デカーボナイゼーション
we
プランを作っていたので、
put together
それ
this
がちょっとハイドロジェンに偏
decarbonization
った
plan,
計画を
which
作って
was a
も、
little bit
あまりうま
skewed
くいかないなと
to
いうふうに思
hydrogen
い始めましたの
initially, but
で、
we thought that we need to
ちょっ
adjust
とピラー
because
1、2、3と
hydrogen has toned down a little
ちょっ
bit.
と
So
文字だ
that's
け
why
書い
we
てありま
have
すけれども、
pillar 1, 2, and
代替
3
燃料ですね、
in the
新
middle
燃料の話。
to focus
あと
on
もう
some
一つは
other
ロ
alternative
ー
fuels.
カルガバメントは、日
And
本のローカル
also,
ガバメントはですね、東京都以外お金
the
がありませんので、
local
どう
governments
しよ
in
うかと思った
Japan
時に
don't
サステナ
have
ブルフ
much
ァイナンスフレームワークの
budget.
仕組みを
Tokyo Metropolitan
作
Government
りま
does,
した。
but the other
で、あ
governments
とは
don't have
少
much
し
budget. So we were
一つ
thinking
目線
about how
で
we
オ
can
フショ
build
ア
a
とオフショア
sustainable
ウィンドパ
finance
ワーというです
framework.
ね、どのように
And
関わるか
also,
というような
how
ものを
should
入れて、
we
少し
be involved in
転換し
offshore
なが
wind
ら、
power? So we
形を
changed
支
from
援やですね、
going all in to hydrogen to working on 3 pillars. And so you can see how we've changed flexibly along with the times as we built our plan. And so in March 25, we were able to announce the Port of Yokohama decarbonization plan. And then so, we've had the pleasure of working with Director Wooley since around 2023, which is wonderful. And so when you put a plan together, by the time the plan was done, all of a sudden AI becomes very important, and AI started to boost the demand for the power. And people started to say how much it will be required in the future. So, again, we adjusted once again to add data center on top of the 3 core pillars. How do we address data centers is also an important topic. And I will introduce a little bit later on about this urban data center and offshore data center, which are also initiatives that we are working on together with corporations. So now I'd like to move on to more details to show you some best practices regarding Pillar 1. This is energy bunkering of next generation types of energy, and we've done methanol bunkering. And so this is something that we've done together with private sector companies together, and we shared the budget, and it was a really wonderful weather on this day. Had a memorable day. These companies, as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, are the companies that joined us in this initiative. And the other one is the one that the national government is working on most of all as next generation energy, which is ammonia. So with NYK Group, Yokohama has had a relationship for over 150 years. And so again, they are focusing on ammonia. So we too are going to fully support their initiatives regarding ammonia bunkering at our ports. And so currently we do this once a month. And then finally, this is regarding that data center, because all of a sudden we understand that AI becomes so important. And as soon as we put together the decarbonization plan, people are saying we don't have enough power. So we need to address data centers as well. We're doing this together with JERA, Japan's largest power generator. And they wanted to construct a data center within the power plant site around the port. But as Yokohama Port, as we showed you in that graph, we are trying to reduce the CO2 emissions in our port. So JERA's data center being built there will be an impact to increasing the CO2. So we have to simulate what kind of an impact their data center will have and try to address that with low carbon energy to have them operate their data center. So again, this is a type of initiative that is taking place based on a memorandum of understanding. This one is offshore data center. So this is more futuristic, this initiative. And again, this is done as a consortium together with NYK Line. You can see it's different from that data center on land. There are several issues that data centers on land have, and those issues can be solved when you have a data center on the ocean. So that's why we have this initiative of offshore data center working on these tests that you can see on the bottom left-hand side. So yes, these are the initiatives that we're working on here in Yokohama Port, trying to find out what kind of solutions we can deliver for a better society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nakamura, for an excellent overview of the Port of Yokohama's decarbonization efforts. Our third presenter is Ms. Colleen Liang from the Port of Oakland. Thank you. Welcome. And Colleen, I would like to turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you. Good evening from California. Good morning to folks joining us from Japan and other parts of the world. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that. Those are great presentations. I'm always impressed learning more and more from Yokohama. So I'll do my best in representing Oakland. My name is Colleen Liang, Director of Environmental Programs and Planning. Thank you again to Pacific Environment for the opportunity to present the Port of Oakland zero emission initiatives with you today. There we go. So first, I'd like to share some general information about the Port of Oakland. Through a City of Oakland charter, the port is an independent agency. We're governed by a board of port commissioners that are nominated and appointed by the City of Oakland's mayor. We manage 4 business lines. A lot of people only think that we manage seaport, but we also manage waterfront commercial real estate, the Oakland San Francisco Bay Airport, and we also are a utility provider. So that means we purchase and provide power to our tenants. At the seaport, we provide about 80% of power to our tenants, and at the airport, we provide 100% power to our tenants. The Port of Oakland is an economic engine that drives Northern California. We support nearly 100,000 jobs in our region. Our entire Port of Oakland portfolio, so from the seaport to the airport and our commercial real estate and utilities divisions, we provide 970 million state and local taxes. And personal income and local spending generates a total of $7.6 billion. So I wanted to share some fun facts with you today, focusing on the seaport this evening. We are the 9th busiest seaport in the United States and the 4th largest seaport in the West Coast. We are the #1 refrigeration exports in the US. And our top exports are nuts and frozen proteins and recycled materials and beverages. For imports, it's furniture, home goods, electronics, batteries, and plastic products, just to name a few. But we are a balanced port, and what that means is we have both 50% of our businesses imports and 50% of our businesses exports. But while we continue to grow, we want to continue to grow sustainably. So the Port of Oakland has been working to reduce emissions and improve air quality for decades. From 2005 to 2024, we've seen a reduction of 89% in diesel particulate matter, and that's a lot. And in the early 2000s, we focused on alternative fuels and clean diesel on retrofits and replacement of the cargo handling equipment. But now our focus has been towards zero emissions. So our latest plans and our partnerships and our funding really are setting that pathway towards zero emissions. These advancements have been made possible by extensive partnerships with our maritime stakeholder groups and collaboration with our community organizations and collaboratives to really help advance our goal of zero emissions at Port of Oakland. This map that you see is just a snapshot of some of the environmental initiatives that are occurring today or are planned to happen in the near future. All of our berths here have shore power infrastructure for our visiting vessels to plug in to instead of burning fuel while at the dock. We're also upgrading our substations to help accommodate for that increase in electrical capacity to meet the needs of the transition to battery electric cargo handling equipment as well as trucks. Tonight, I just wanted to highlight a few initiatives that we've constructed or are currently underway. So in 2024, the largest hydrogen fueling station in the US opened and is right adjacent to the Port of Oakland's campus. There's about 30 hydrogen fuel cell trucks that are being demonstrated or used at the Port of Oakland who will use the hydrogen fueling station as well. And through local, state, and federal funding, we seek opportunities to help advance our goals and further transition the remaining equipment to zero emissions. Because as you may know, that transitioning towards zero emissions can be costly. And so we're helping our tenants and our maritime stakeholders in bridging that gap and hoping that they will advance towards zero emissions equipment. And our own goal of preparing the electrical grid is to be more modern and resilient. And so we're building up our carbon-free power sources by assessing generating renewable energy locally, but also purchasing clean energy on the open market. So in October of 2023, the Port of Oakland entered into a green shipping corridor memorandum of understanding with the City of Yokohama's Ports and Harbor Bureau to continue to build that partnership and share decarbonization efforts and initiatives between each other. Our memorandum of understanding actually expires this year. So we are looking forward to renewing that memorandum of understanding to further our goals in decarbonization efforts in the maritime industry between our ports. As you may have seen in Mr. Nakamura's presentation, that the Port of Oakland is primarily a second port of call. So what that means is most of the vessels first visit LA and Long Beach first in California, and then they come to Oakland. So we do a little bit, just a little bunkering, not a significant amount, but we are very eager to continue to collaborate with the other ports and shipping lines to continue to develop more green shipping corridors to help improve our sustainable maritime operations. So in 2024, we also would like to highlight that the Port of Oakland was awarded $322 million from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, with over $100 million that's contributed also from our project partners, as well as the port, to implement our Clean Ports program. The Clean Ports program converts a wide range of cargo handling equipment to zero emission technology and providing infrastructure to support the equipment while scrapping, so removing older diesel equipment. This slide just provides a snapshot of the different components that feed into our Clean Ports program, and I'll go further into detail in the next few slides. So here is our industry and technical partners who will either be converting equipment and trucks to zero emissions or installing infrastructure to support that transition. We also have consultants to help assist and guide our technical partners through the grant program to oversee grant compliance and assist with reporting. And as you can see, we have at least 10 industry and technical partners. We're also partnering with the Bay Area Air District, which is our local air district, to help guide through the requirements and our air quality monitoring that I will discuss shortly. So Clean Ports program will deploy over 600 zero-emission drayage trucks and zero-emission cargo handling equipment. And as I also mentioned, install supporting infrastructure. A majority of it will be battery electric, but we will have some project partners who are looking into hydrogen fuel cell powered equipment as well. Part of our program includes a truck leasing program where 2 project partners will lease trucks for companies to utilize. One of our partners is Watt EV, and after a formal procurement process, they will be purchasing 300 Tesla Class 8 trucks. And the first 50 are expected to arrive this summer. So we're definitely excited to see that being used in our Seaport campus. In addition to the equipment transition, we will be implementing a truck loaner program for truck drivers to rent and use in our campus. We've heard that there's hesitation from the small truck companies, particularly the truck drivers who own and operate their own trucks, to switch to battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell because of concerns with the new technology. So the Port of Oakland, we are purchasing up to 10 zero-emission trucks. Right now, it's the portfolio is about 5 electric battery electric, and then 5 hydrogen fuel cell trucks. That could change as we receive proposals from partners on those purchases. And we hope that this truck loaner program will help bridge that transition gap, that hesitation gap that these truck owner and operators have today. And this grant really was community-led. There are residents adjacent to the Port of Oakland, and that we felt it was very important to include as part of this application. And so we asked what did they want to see in this as part of this program. And we received overwhelming feedback that they want to include the transition of zero-emission trucks as well as cargo handling equipment. And that's why you see a large part of our portfolio in this project is transitioning those types of equipment and trucks. But we also felt it was very important to include them in this program to assist the port in conducting outreach to educate, inform, and receive feedback about this the progress of this project. And it's just as about the Port of Oakland in general. And so as a result, we partnered with 4 of the community-based organizations that will fund together $6 million of their work, which the Port of Oakland is contributing $1.4 million to the program as well. Not shown here, but is what I would also consider a community partner is our workforce development organizations. So we recognize as we modernize our equipment, the workforce also needs to modernize its workers as well, to be able to use, repair, maintain these pieces of new equipment. And so we've partnered with 3 workforce development organizations to help shape a program to train these employees that are in this space. And part of the Clean Ports program, there's a lot of components, but the last component is our fence line air quality monitoring program. This is to track our emissions reductions from the project. So in collaboration with the community organizations, as well as the air district that I mentioned earlier, we issued a request for proposals to the public to retain a contractor to help us with this project. So we've just finished conducting interviews of the contractors, and we hope to select that contractor in the next coming months. So with input from the community partners, the contractor will help locate where these pieces of equipment will go, and what we will sample for, and they will also be the ones installing the equipment and conducting the monitoring and reporting program. And so we hope to start this monitoring program later this year or early next year. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for sharing Port of Oakland's on-the-ground experiences. Our final presenter today is Director David Wooley from UC Berkeley. Welcome back, David. The floor is yours.
Well, I would like to open just by re-emphasizing a point that Colleen made, which is how important these ports and terminals are to the economies, the public health, both regional and national economies. And, for example, in California, the Port of Oakland is really critical to the success of the agricultural economy in the Central Valley. So, but of course, there's also the impacts on public health, and port emissions can significantly contribute to air pollution. So these entities are very, very important to our nations and to our states and to our local government. I'm trying to go to the next slide here. Oh, there it is. I got it. Okay. So I mentioned this earlier that this is a, kind of a very complex period of time that our governments and our businesses are going through, and that the work to reduce emissions from ports has to take all of that into account. And in some cases, it's a driver of those activities. One thing I'd like to say also at the beginning is that container terminals and maritime ports, are so important, and yet the irony is that they're also often invisible to the consumers and businesses that they serve until they're not, until that time when there's a crisis and supply chains. Then people look to ports and terminals for solutions. And I'm very happy to see that the container terminals and government agencies in Japan and California are providing solutions and leadership, both for the economic, energy, and environmental transitions ahead of us, for which the maritime ports play a really important role. Another thing I want to emphasize in the beginning is that the CNP, described by Mr. Hori from the ministry, and the Yokohama plan are very significant achievements. And I've been really impressed with the progress that they've made in a short period of time, and also the progress that the Port of Oakland has made. And so we're in this place where we can learn a lot from each other as these two leading jurisdictions move forward on this very important mission. Since I have limited time, I'm going to go right to a brief description of the recommendations we made in our report. But again, coming from the standpoint of how important and creative the work has been so far, and so we're just looking sort of provide some advice, some reflections on where it could go from here. So one of the first ones, let me see if I'm in the right place. I'm not. Okay, let me see where we are. Well, one of the main recommendations that we made was to include electric power system planning in the early stage planning of the decarbonization effort. We learned a lot about that in Oakland, which sits in a load pocket for electric power supply. And so one of the first things to do in developing decarbonization equipment practices is to make sure you have enough power. And this is not something you can leave to somebody else to do. There'd be a temptation, of course, to say, oh, that's the problem to be solved by the transmission owner or the electric utilities. Keep in mind that those people are being pulled in 100 different directions during this very complex energy transition we're into, and they may not know what you need unless you get out there early on and let them know. And it's very important to do this early, and so we're recommending that the CNP include electricity supply planning as part of the planning effort for the CNP. Another thing we talked about in our paper a lot is the importance of expanding the experience that is occurring under the CNP to other types of terminals and ports in Japan. That is the ro-ro ports, bulk cargo, tanker terminals. I recognize that this was a huge effort to do this for container terminals, and it's going to be a lot of work to do it again for these other terminals. But I think that the success with container terminals suggests that it's important to do it for other terminals as well. Another thing we focused a lot on in the paper was the importance of doing shore power. Colleen pointed out that all of the berths in California at container ports, at Port of Oakland and container ports statewide, have shore power at the berths, that shipping berths, and very, very high percentages of ship calls plug into that equipment. And of course, that requires a lot of infrastructure to make sure you have the power to supply when those ships come in. And California and the Port of Oakland have been real pioneers in that. And of course, that is directly related to the need to forecast electric power demand early and plan for electric power infrastructure to meet that higher electric power demand that is inevitable from this transition. And I appreciate Mr. Nakamura's point that in the middle of all this is also the growth of data centers and those electric demands as well. And some of those are occurring at or near port cities, both in Japan and in California. One of the other recommendations we made in the paper is to make sure that terminals are recognized for efforts to support domestic supply chains for zero carbon liquid fuels, and also to build up the power systems in order to support electrification of coastal shipping. I'm aware that there's a national policy to electrify coastal shipping in Japan. I think that is a really important objective, and ports like Yokohama and the others in the Tokyo region, will need to be able to support that transition. And so that's another reason to focus on that electric power planning. On zero carbon fuels, really pleased to see the work that the Port of Yokohama has done with learning how to do the bunkering of alternative fuels, in particular biomethanol or green methanol. I think that that's going to be very important to this transition, both in the United States and in Japan. Of course, if we are able to develop an alternative supply of vessel fuels that are zero carbon, it'll address the challenge that that conflict over fossil fuels has had on the price of bunker fuel, of fossil-based bunker fuel. And so the questions to ask are, is the thing that's happened recently temporary, or will the infrastructure damage constrain conventional bunker markets for the long term? It looks like it will not be fixed quickly. And so the green methanol or biomethanol can be a hedge against those future supply and price disruptions. And we also expect as the production of these fuels and others, including green ammonia, as experience increases with them, we expect prices to drop as production gets to scale. One of the things we've discovered in California is that there are large quantities of underutilized sustainable biomass available to be a feedstock for these alternative fuels. I'm not going to go through the detail here on the numbers, but we think that there's a real potential here. And what I discovered is that Japan also has large quantities of this domestic biomass, and that the biomass is sustainable and suitable for production of low or zero carbon liquid fuels. And there's an opportunity in Japan as well. And one question we posed in the paper is, could Japan gradually shift sustainable biomass away from incinerators and landfills and power plant boilers to begin to produce sustainable liquid fuels? We also took a look at the question of LNG, and one of the things that we thought about is the role that the ports play in regard to liquefied natural gas as a fossil fuel and the implications of that for climate change. And it struck us that the ports have a really important role to play here in terms of, one, measuring emissions from the use of methane emissions from the use of those fuels, and looking for ways to basically shift incentives from LNG to these other alternative fuels as a way to address, begin to address both the conventional and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. We had some other recommendations. We took a look at we thought that for certification levels 3, 4, and 5, instead we would recommend a stronger requirement to have a strong start on battery electric or green hydrogen fuel cells for cargo handling equipment and yard tractors, as well as points for bunkering of low and zero carbon emission fuels. Both would need to be phased in as equipment and fuel become available, but making this a higher priority in the CMP is one of the recommendations we have. The other thing we were hoping is that the CMP certification would be revised fairly frequently. I think the proposal is to do it every 5 years. The experience might warrant doing that more frequently. We also had some recommendations. I won't go into detail here, but to set, with regard to increasing the scope of emission offsets and emission inventories and measurement of emissions, to make sure that the public and the ports and the government have clear information about the emissions and what's happening to emissions as a result of these transitions. And particularly we were hoping the ports would include emissions from hinterland transport and from ships at berth in the emission inventories. I'm also struck in doing this research about the number of things that California has in common or in parallel with Japan. Both jurisdictions are seeking to develop offshore wind, and I come away feeling that that is very, very important in both places in order to ensure that we have the levels of clean electric power generation to be made available for this transition. One of the things I'm very impressed with the Port of Yokohama about is the efforts to support a domestic supply chain for zero carbon liquid fuels for vessels. Mr. Nakamura talked about that, and that is really one of the world leading positions that Port and City of Yokohama and the nation of Japan are doing for the whole world with that leadership. Again, some detailed recommendations on emission inventories at the Port of Port of Yokohama. In part, this was driven by experience in Port of Oakland, where over time the port has expanded the range of emissions that are included in their emission inventories and measurement. I'm pleased to see that effort that Colleen mentioned with regard to fence line monitoring of emissions. And here are some additional things that we think would be helpful for ports to do in terms of taking a leadership on the transition. Some of it's monitoring, some of it's shifting of incentives, and some of it's infrastructure. So there's a lot to do here. That picture on the right is a picture of methane losses from ships, so-called methane slip, that you can only see with a certain kind of a camera. But we know that those emissions are significant, and measurement is the first step toward controlling any kind of emissions. So at that point, those are my comments, and I want to thank the audience for joining us here today, and I look forward to participating in the question and answer.
Thank you, David, for that comprehensive and insightful presentation. We will now move into the panel discussion. Director Wooley, Mr. Hori, Mr. Nakamura, and Ms. Liang will continue with us as panelists. Joining them is Mr. Imaizumi, and Teresa will be moderating the discussion. Before handing the floor over to Teresa, I'd like to briefly reintroduce Mr. Imaizumi. Mr. Oliver Yasuhito Imaizumi is an executive researcher at the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. He joined the institute in April this year and works across both the clean energy business and environment units. Early in his career, he played a key role in launching the first LNG bunkering business in Tokyo Bay. He later served in Singapore, where he led global bunker trading operations. After returning to Tokyo, he led the development of an ammonia fuel supply chain. In 2023, he initiated several Green Corridor projects through his work with Maersk McKinney Moller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. At IEJ, he focuses on global energy and environmental policy research and analysis, contributing to Japan's energy strategy. Welcome, Oliver. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm Oliver from the IEJ. I hope we can have a productive and engaging session together. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, for that introduction. Now, I'd like to turn the spotlight over to Teresa to begin the panel discussion. Before we do, a quick reminder to our audience. Please share your questions using the Q&A box. We will collect questions throughout the session. We will do our best to address them in real time. Teresa, when you are ready, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Katsunori, and thank you to all of our speakers for the excellent presentations and remarks. Today's presentation have offered valuable perspectives from government, ports, and academia. And so for our panel discussion, I like to organize our conversation around 3 questions. What lessons can be drawn from Director Wooley's analysis? What are the key challenges to scaling port decarbonization, and how can they be addressed? And then what actions should be prioritized to accelerate implementation and achieve emission reductions? So let's begin with the first question. David, can I ask you, after completing your analysis of Japan's carbon neutral port framework and Yokohama's decarbonization efforts, what do you believe are the most important lessons for policymakers and port leaders to take away?
Thank you, Teresa. So if I had to pick out 2 most important critical things to do, the first one would be elevate the attention and investment of capital in the infrastructure of electric power supply at ports. nothing can happen with regard to shore power, renewable hydrogen, stable electric supply, unless, for shipping and trucks, unless you have the power. And so it's a mistake that some planners make by not putting that early in the effort. And the other one that I'd like to emphasize is the importance of shore power. And of course, it's closely linked to getting enough resources on the electric power supply side. One thing I'm reminded about is a point that Mr. Hori made when we were visiting with him and his team in Tokyo. And that was that there's also a need for short power for the smaller ports that serve as for the intercoastal shipping. And his point was maybe that needs to be the highest priority because those ships stay in port longer. So I thought that was a very important lesson to learn about the specific needs of ports in Japan with regard to shore power.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. Colleen, it was very exciting to hear from the port on your environmental accomplishments. And so, having heard from both the Japanese presentation and David's analysis, which findings or recommendations resonates most strongly with your experience at the Port of Oakland?
Yeah, it's a great question. And after those fantastic presentations, I would say it all resonates. I know I'm cheating with that answer, but as the Port of Oakland continues to look for those opportunities to advance zero emission goals, and what we see from these presentations, it's not just the port, right? It's not Port of Oakland, it's not just Port of Yokohama. One port can't do it all. We're just one piece of that industry, of the connection from land to sea to energy to policies. We're all connected. And so in order for us to move forward toward a sustainable and cleaner environment and in all our operations, we all must work together. And also just another very interesting thing to hear about the data centers in Mr. Nakamura's presentation. We also hear that there's a growing interest to have them located near or at the ports. And so I don't have a response to that, but just we're closely monitoring how this interplays with our port area and how the power issue will be addressed.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Yeah, that was something that was very interesting when we visited the port as well. Welcome, Oliver. From the perspective of maritime fuels and energy systems, which findings or recommendation do you consider the most significant?
Yes, the most significant takeaway from Dr. Wooley's analysis from the maritime fuels and the energy system perspective is that the success of port decarbonization will depend less on choosing the right fuel and more on how the overall energy system is designed. His analysis highlights that while there is a strong focus on fuels, whether hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, or others, the real constraint lies in power infrastructure, fuel supply chains, and integration between ports and the surrounding industrial systems. This is a critical point because all fuel pathways currently face uncertainty in terms of life cycle emission, cost, and future regulation. So the key implication is that the policies should not be built around a single fuel pathway, but rather should enable a flexible energy system that can accommodate multiple fuel options as they evolve. In that sense, Dr. Wooley is essentially shifting the discussion from which fuels wins to whether the system can support transition at scale. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Mr. Hori, is there one lesson from Japan's CNP experience that you would want to highlight or emphasize to an international audience? Mr. Hori?
はい、
Yes. So that was very insightful what we learned from the analysis of Director Wooley. It's a lot of learnings for us as we proceed in this initiative going forward. And I'd like to pick one to answer the question. At the very end, he talked about the biomass resource and the possibility of utilizing it in the future. That was really resonating in that sense because it was focusing on the community around the ports, and it links to Oliver's point as well. There's a lot of initiatives going on in many ports in Japan, and if we can provide one learning, it depends on the location and the industry that surrounds the port, and the neighborhood that it is various. It can be very different port by port. And so it's really important, I think, that you need to look at the reality of each port to find the most effective and efficient methodology to realize decarbonization. You need to be selective, and you need to maybe focus on the potential of a certain community, which is unique.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Nakamura, thank you and congratulations to the Port of Yokohama for your leadership, your environmental stewardship. From your experience, what lesson would you like other ports to take away?
はい、とても光栄でございます。ありがとうございます。先生、ウリー先生の説はやっぱ、ショアパワーですね。ショアパワーと、エレクトリシティの問題。これ、やっぱり、短期的にも長期的にも大事だと思ってございます。で、コリンさんのね、おっしゃったように、オークランド港も EPA、まあ、要するに連邦政府から、いろいろね、補助金をいただいて、取り組むわけなんですけども、ちょっと、堀さんにね、もうちょっと日本でもショアパワーへの、補助をですね、ちょっとご検討いただけたらと。これ僕が言ってんじゃなくて、ウーリー先生が言ってるんで、まあ、ちょっとよろしくお願いします。以上です。
Great, thank you so much. My next question is, David, your report identified several opportunities, but also highlighted important implementation challenges. What do you see as the greatest challenge facing ports over the next decade? Oh, you're on mute, David.
Thank you, Teresa. One of the things I'm struck with, a few years ago, we did a paper on offshore wind potential in the United States. And so we went deep on that. It was a multidisciplinary team econometric study. And, and I was working on the supply chain piece of that. And so we were looking at both the opportunity and the need for offshore wind. And so we've gotten a start here in California on that, although it's still very early stages. And so I studied where I could find information about this, what's happening on offshore wind in Japan. And it's a similar thing. No one's done this before in terms of the floating offshore wind turbines in the Pacific, at least. Well, no, there may be exceptions to that, but it's new. First time for California, first time for Japan with that technology, I think. And so I think the more I think about this, the more important getting that offshore wind resource done at scale to this entire thing. This, of course, is not easy. It requires a lot of capital. It requires a lot of new technology and learning. But if both jurisdictions could get to 10 gigawatts by 2035, this would help solve a lot of problems and fill some gaps in this transition.
Thank you so much, David. Mr. Hori, from the national policy perspective, what challenges to scaling port decarbonization concerns MLIT the most?
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you for the question. So in pursuing decarbonization in ports, we need a lot of capital investment and effort. And in order to gain those efforts, corporates and local municipalities needs to be able to gain visibility for the future. We think that's really important to have a good visibility for the future. But on the other hand, in order to realize decarbonization, we need products, services, these too. But there's still costs incurred. Technology development is also uncertain as well. So all in all, we feel that many stakeholders are still concerned about making big bets on where to invest in, as Colleen also mentioned in Oakland port situation. So as Japan government, we just hope that all stakeholders gain a sense of reassurance by having visibility into the future. And I think putting together plans and supporting POCs would also be very helpful to gain visibility and provide subsidies and grants so that we can reduce uncertainty as much as possible. I'll stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Nakamura. I heard the need for funding for shore power, but what challenge is the most significant from your perspective from the Port of Yokohama?
Sure. So first and foremost, power. Yes. As Director Uli said, we need to really think about what to do with the power grid, and the electricity transmission is really important, and it's not just Yokohama Port, it's significant for all ports. We have TEPCO Power Grid Corporation, actually the one and only company that is in charge of the electricity power for this. And so we have the TEPCO grid, and we've signed off an MOU a few years ago, and it's not easy really, and just as of now there's not much we can present either, but we would like to continue to deepen our communication so that we can continue our dialogue regarding running this power grid for the Tokyo area. As Colleen mentioned, it's really about more about how to build a substation in the ports. That's a relatively lower hanging fruit, but also it's really important to tenaciously work on this with long-term visibility. Colleen, I haven't been talking with Tim-san recently. Please say hi to Tim.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Speaking of Colleen, my question to you is, what challenge has been the most difficult in Oakland's transition towards zero-emission operations? It was very impressive to see the scale, the speed that you've been able to get zero-emission drainage trucks and zero-emission cargo handling equipment.
Yeah, do we have a few hours to talk? I'm just kidding. But joking aside, something that I believe we need to continue to work on is that, or I should mention, is that the Port of Oakland, we don't have authority to require or mandate the type of equipment that our tenants who operate the cargo handling equipment and the shipping lines, for what type of fuel for them to use. We can only encourage and promote our goals, but we can't require it. And so, we try to constantly think of ways that we can bridge that gap. And earlier I also mentioned that we hear concerns about the cost and reliability of new technology, and sometimes we just need to take that risk, right? But taking that risk can be expensive. And so one way we have been successful in bridging that funding gap is finding grant funding opportunities with our stakeholders, partnering with them where they can't be the applicant, but we can be a co-applicant where the Port of Oakland is the lead. And then we also continue to engage with those industry partners on showcasing these new technology we have truck fairs, we held a a zero emission symposium, really to bring all the industry partners together and look at this new technology and what could work here at Oakland. And one other factor I wanted to bring up was the availability of charging stations, public truck charging stations, as well as hydrogen fuel stations. We can install as many here at the Port of Oakland, but these trucks don't just stay here at the Oakland campus. So we're working with California Energy Commission as well as other agencies to really look at the infrastructure that's needed along all these truck routes in California and the US to help really support all the ports going towards zero emissions here in the US.
Great. Thank you so much, Colleen. To our audience, please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A box and we will try to answer your questions as we get them. So switching gears a little bit, this question is for Oliver. How do fuel availability and energy infrastructure affect the pace of port decarbonization? I know you said we need to align on a common fuel, but yeah, over to you.
Yeah, sure. All right. The pace of the port decarbonization from the fuel perspective is fundamentally constrained by two things: fuel availability and the infrastructure needed to supply the fuel. On fuel availability, while there are multiple alternative fuel options, all of them still face uncertainties in terms of supply, scale, price, and reliability. From the shipping perspective, it's not enough for a fuel to exist. In theory, it must be consistently available across major ports to be a viable option. But even more critical is the infrastructure side. Without adequate bunkering facilities, strategies, and distribution networks, supply chain, no alternate fuel can be deployed at scale, regardless of its technical potential. So in reality, fuel adoption is driven less by what is optimal and more by what is actually available and usable. That is why, to accelerate decarbonization, the priority should be building flexible fuel supply infrastructure that can support multiple fuel pathways, rather than committing too early to a single fuel solution.
Thank you so much, Oliver. David, so after hearing these perspectives, do you see common challenges emerging across Japan and California?
Yeah, I was struck by the similarities between what we're looking at in California on port and maritime terminal decarbonization and what's happening in Japan. And both are leaders. One area California may be ahead with regard to shore power, but Japan is ahead with regard to the alternative fuels for vessels. So that's why I want to emphasize the opportunity is to learn from each other as co-leaders in this on a global scale. The other thing that strikes me is that it may be discouraging for people around the world to see the current U.S. government kind of disparage efforts on climate and clean energy transition. And I just want to assure people that at least in the United States, state governments are maintaining the momentum on this, making the investments, doing the innovation, building the fuel supplies. It's harder to do it just at the state level, but it is happening. And so my prediction is that I emphasize the need for California and Japan to continue to strengthen cooperation on all of these technical and economic and social issues surrounding port decarbonization. My prediction is that the Trump administration will fade like a bad dream, and that the United States will return as an important partner in this effort in future years. And I look forward to that.
Seems like a great note to end this webinar on. I would like to thank Director Wooley, Mr. Hori, Mr. Nakamura, Colleen, and Oliver for sharing their insights and experiences today. and for contributing to such a thoughtful and engaging conversation. Today's conversation highlights both the significant progress that has been made, but also the important work that still lies ahead. And so we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you all. And on behalf of Pacific Environment, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I will hand it back to Katsunori for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And on behalf of Pacific Environment, I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to our guest speakers and to everyone who joined us today. We hope today's discussion has provided useful insights into Japan's CNP initiative and broader efforts to advance maritime decarbonization. As a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be made available on Pacific Environment's YouTube channel in both English and Japanese. Thank you again for your participation, and we look forward to continuing these important conversations in the future. This concludes today's webinar. We wish you a wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
ありがとうございました。さよなら。